Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second class. As I said yesterday, we would be moving on to perimeter, and more specifically, perimeter of polygons. Now, before we actually go into the math here, let's define some of these words I've used. So first off, a polygon is any 2D shape made from straight lines. And essentially, the number of lines or sides determines the polygon's name. So for example, you have 3 lines or 3 sides, you're called a triangle. If you have 4, you're a quadrilateral. And that sounds like a really fancy name, but you know them as rectangles, squares, but we typically use quadrilateral for any 4-sided shapes because that could also include rhombi, trapezoids, and parallelograms. All right, so moving on from that, we have pentagons, we have hexagons, heptagons, and so on and so forth, right? Now, after 4 sides, so starting at 5 and on, you do not need to memorize these for this year. Now, if you want to give yourself a leg up for next year, because you will have to memorize them, do so as much as you can. Especially the number 5 pentagons, 6 hexagons, and 8 octagons. Those are the ones you're going to see a lot of. All right, so the faster you put that in your vocabulary, the easier it's going to be for you, especially for next year. Now, you might also see the term regular polygon used, and all that means is that it's a polygon that has the same length for all of their sides. So for example, if I have here a pentagon, because it has 5 sides, I could either tell you that is a regular pentagon, or I could also show you by using these lines, right? So those lines say that every single side that has the same number of lines is equal to each other. So let's jump in and talk about what perimeter is. And I know most of you probably already know this from elementary, but I just want to make sure that we do. So it's essentially the distance around a 2D shape. So if we have a a rectangle here, we know that the green line is the perimeter and our blue is the area. Now, please make sure, because we're going to be jumping into area next class, that you know the difference and you don't confuse the two. Okay, it's a common mistake that students make. So to find perimeter, you simply just add up all the side lengths, right? Now, before you do that, you should be stopping yourself because you have to make sure that all the measurements of all the sides are in the same units. We could try to trick you up by putting the height, for example, in millimeter and then the length in centimeters. And if you're not checking the units, you might be adding them together. Remember, when you add up numbers, specifically in perimeter, or even when you're doing area, as we'll see next class, you have to make sure that the numbers are in the same units. Okay, so double check that before you move on. Okay, so that's simple enough. Let's go into our first example here. So, what's the perimeter of the stop sign? So let's revisit that stop sign. Now, you might already know a stop sign is an octagon, and it is a regular octagon. And I'll just prove this to make sure by putting the line. So all the sides are equal to 32 centimeters. So here's what you could do to solve this. You could do method 1, which is simply by adding 32 times plus 32 plus 32 plus 32, so on and so forth. But you might see 2 problems with that. One, it's really long to write and to then put into your calculator. You're wasting a lot of time. But at the end of the day, it is going to give you 256 centimeters. The other issue that you might see and might give you the wrong answer is you might forget one of the side lengths, or you might accidentally add an extra side length when you're punching it into your calculator. So there is a better method, and we're going to use an equation to do that. So the equation looks like this. Perimeter is equal to S times N. S stands for the side length, so in this case it's 32 centimeters, and the N stands for the number of sides. So in this case we have 8 sides. So what we're going to do is then we're going to fill in this equation. And I also want to remind you, I said it before, but just in case, when you have 2 brackets next to each other, you multiply the numbers that are inside them. Okay, so you multiply them together. And when you do that, you know that you get a perimeter of 256 centimeters, which is the same answer we got above, right? So you'll notice that it's a much simpler way of doing things. It's a lot easier. You don't have to punch as many things into the calculator, and it removes the likelihood of you making a mistake by putting an extra length or forgetting one. All right. Now this is really important, and that's why it's in red. This technique, or using this equation, can only be used when working with regular polygons. It will not work for a rectangle. Rectangles have two equal sides, and the other sides are different, and they'll be equal to each other too. But you have two different measurements. Okay, four sides, but two different measurements. In regular polygons, all the measurements are the same. So you have one measurement for all of them. Okay, so with that done, let's move to example 2. Example 2 is going to be a little bit different, but it's not too difficult. So what's the side length of the equilateral triangle if the perimeter is 63 millimeters? So let's use a diagram here. Now, I'll say this now. Next year, or whatever, next year or Sec 3, we might not give you the name here. We might give you the name, but we might not give you the actual diagram. So you would have to remember that in an equilateral triangle, all the sides are the same. So we don't even need to put those little lines here, because you should know from the name that all the sides are the same. So we're trying to find one of those sides, the length of one of those sides. Let's say this one in particular. All right. So to solve this, all you would do, you take your formula. All right. Now you don't have to use this formula or this equation. You could think of it logically. If you have three sides and you know the perimeter is 63 millimeters, all you would have to do is divide by 3, since there's 3 sides, right? Each one would add up to 63. But this method will help train you for next year, especially when you'll be working with algebra. So give it a shot and see if you understand. So I have my equation. Remember that S is equal to side length and N is number of sides. So let's fill in our equation with what we have. So 63 is equal to S times 3. Now, we are looking for S. That's what we want. We need it by itself. So we need to find a way to get rid of this 3. Now, since they're multiplied by each other, we can get rid of this 3 by dividing. So we could get rid of this 3 by dividing on this side by the same thing. When we do that, they cancel out. They don't just disappear. 3 divided by 3 will give me 1. So it's the equivalent of 1s, which is what we want. What is the side of 1? Side length, right? So now, some students will forget about this and they'll write the answer as 63. But obviously we know that's not the answer, because when we have an equation and when we change the equation by doing this, we're allowed, so long as we do the same thing on this side. We need to balance it. Think of this as a mirror. Whatever we do to this side, we have to do to this side. So let's do that now. So 63 divided by 3, and then I'll clean it up. 63 divided by 3 is equal to S. All we have to do is divide the 63, and we get 21 is equal to the side length, right? So it's as simple as that. Example 3. So this one's going to have a lot of info in it, so we are going to have to break it down. So let's read the question. What's the perimeter of the large rectangle in the diagram below? So here's our diagram. Like I said, there's a lot of info, so let's see what we do know. We have a small rectangle, the pink one, that has a length of 20 centimeters, and it also has a height of 6 centimeters. Now that info by itself does not give us the answer. We can't just add, like we would, to find the perimeter using those numbers to get the perimeter of our large rectangle. But we can use that info indirectly. So let's find the length of the large rectangle and the height of the large rectangle. So we know that the length is at least 20, and then 4 centimeters longer to the right and 4 centimeters longer to the left. And at the same time, we also know that the height is 3 centimeters taller to the top and 3 centimeters taller at the bottom. So what we're going to have to do is, to figure out length, we take our 20 from the small rectangle and add each side. So this 4 from the left and this 4 from the right, and we add it together to get 28 centimeters. So now we know that the length of one side of this large green rectangle is 28 centimeters. Now we're going to do the same thing for height. So we know it's at least 6 centimeters. It has 3 centimeters at the top more and 3 centimeters at the bottom more, and that gives us a total of 12 centimeters. So as you can see here, 12 centimeters is our height. With all that info calculated, we can actually find our perimeter by adding each side. So there's 2 sides of 28 centimeters and 2 sides of 12 centimeters. That will give us a total of 80 centimeters. So when you get these types of questions, and there seems to be a lot of info given to you at once, break it down. See what you do know. See what you could use from that. All right, guys, I know you're going to be able to do some of these. So right now, this video is pretty much over. This lesson's over. So please make sure you do your knowledge check. And then after you're done that, join me on the Zoom. So if you have any questions, you could ask me there. And even if you don't, you got perfect on the knowledge check, please still come by, and yeah, we'll be taking attendance, and you can start your homework. All right, guys, bye.